You might have heard the phrase before, it's not left versus right anymore. It's top versus bottom or up versus down. And I wanted to talk about it today because it's pretty important right now. Unless you've been totally disconnected from the rest of the world for the last few years, you no doubt would have seen that the world is becoming more and more politically divided, especially on issues when it comes to things like immigration, climate change. And I think it's good and healthy to have differences of opinions on these issues and have healthy debates. But this extreme division that we're seeing today is not helpful for anyone in society except for the ultra wealthy elites and those who seek to gain more power through division of society. Now, you and I might disagree on some things, we might disagree on a lot of things, and that's fine. I'm sure we also agree on a lot of things as well. We probably agree that housing should be affordable, that our towns and cities should be safe places, that we should have good opportunities for a good job, but also time to live our lives and enjoy the time that we have here. I'm sure there's lots that we can agree on, even if we do disagree on a lot of things. One of the things that we probably would agree on, that the essential basics should be somewhat affordable to people. But right now, they're not. The basic essentials, things like, food, housing, bills, are becoming more and more out of reach and more difficult to access for a lot of people as the inequality of wealth grows in Australia and around the world. We know that here in Australia, things are getting more expensive. But it's not just happening here in Australia. Like, this inequality of wealth is growing around the world in places like the UK, the US, Europe, and other countries. This is the widening gap between the ultra rich, the wealthy elites, and the rest of society, the working people, young people, people like you and I, unless you're a multimillionaire. And the thing is, this constant growth in wealth inequality comes political instability, and it allows these wealthy elites to capitalize on people's fear and concerns and stoke the flames of division to gain more power and more wealth. So just ask yourself for a moment, do you think it's fair that in today's day where more and more people are struggling to pay for the basics, the billionaires and the big corporations, like our big gas corporations, the big supermarkets, the big banks, are making extortionate profits? Is it fair that while a lot of people in our wealthy country are struggling, those at the top are doing better because people are struggling? I don't think that's fair at all. Now, let me use an example of why I say it's not left versus right anymore, it's up versus down. Let's have a look at the gas industry in Australia. The biggest gas corporations in Australia have been making record profits in recent years off the back of high gas prices, mostly since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Basically, as people pay more for their gas bills, the gas companies make more money. These same gas companies are also dodging paying tax. A lot of the biggest gas corporations in Australia haven't paid any tax in Australia in the last 10 years. And they're also getting a lot of the gas for free, royalty free, which is basically royalties are a payment that should go to the Australian people for the gas that is owned by the Australian people, which is instead being given to them for free. They're then sending the gas overseas and making record profits on it. While everyday people are struggling to pay for the basics and are struggling to pay their gas bills to heat their homes, these gas corporations are profiting off of that struggle. This isn't a left versus right issue. This is a big corporations are rorting the system while everyday people are struggling to get by kind of issue. What we could do as a society is instead go, let's come together and make decisions which best benefit society and the majority of people in our country, rather than allowing these ultra wealthy corporations to keep getting away with rorting the system like this and capturing more and more wealth and power in the country. Let's make them pay their fair share of tax, and let's make them pay royalties so that we can use that money for the public good, which is currently being hoarded by a smaller and smaller number of these big corporations and wealthy elites. We can then use that money to electrify homes with solar, to bring down energy bills and get homes off gas, which is really expensive at the moment. We can also use that money to invest in making society better and invest in healthcare and schools, which benefit people and society. My belief is essentially that if we all pay tax and we all pay for the materials and resources we need for our work and businesses, then these gas corporations should pay tax. And they should pay for the gas that they're getting for free, which is owned by the people. If we look beyond left versus right like this, we can then build coalitions of people we probably disagree with on a lot of issues, but we can come together and make it politically possible with enough pressure to make change on these big issues by putting our differences aside and coming together in the common good for the benefit of the majority of people, as opposed to the ultra wealthy billionaires and big corporations. Now let's look at the billionaires and the ultra wealthy individuals. Over the last 10 years, the top 1% of the globe have captured $33 trillion of the world's wealth, which is enough money to end global poverty 22 times over. In Australia, the number of billionaires has doubled in the last 10 years to 161 people, while in the meantime, it's becoming harder and harder for young people and most people generally to buy a house over the last 10 years. And more people are falling below the poverty line as well. Like, how can that be happening in a wealthy country like ours? Especially when billionaires are doubling their wealth, more people are falling into poverty. And it shows clearly that wealth inequality is growing. And with that growing inequality of wealth comes political instability. More people sleeping on the street, more people struggling, more crime, more unsafe towns and cities. This growing inequality is not beneficial to society at all. Only the wealthy billionaire class. They can capitalize on people's fears and concerns as instability grows and inequality grows. Then they can push the blame of these issues onto minority groups of people who look a little bit different to us. And so while we're over here debating these issues, they're over here basically capturing more wealth and more power while we're all looking the other way. And that's what they've been doing for a long time. There's actually a really good meme on this, which I'll put up on the screen. A more equal society is safer, healthier, cleaner, and better for everyone, even the billionaires. Now, I know there's always the argument that we're a free country and people should be able to reap the rewards of what they earn. But when it comes to the billionaires, most billionaires have gained most of their wealth through either inheriting it through their family, like Gina Rinehart, as well as extremely low wages, or off the back of exploitation of people and human rights abuses in other countries. The important thing we need to know about the billionaires, though, is that the more and more wealth that's captured by these billionaires, the more power they have to influence our politics. They can turn their enormous wealth into political power to have influence over our politics and get political outcomes to suit their agenda. And this is what makes billionaires oligarchs. A great example of an oligarch is the billionaire elite Rupert Murdoch. He owns some of the country's biggest newspapers like the Herald Sun and the Australian, and he can use his enormous media empire to push his agenda. And if he doesn't like a piece of legislation or something that the government is doing, he can use his power to kill that legislation. He can mislead the public on a certain piece of legislation that might be better for people in society by pushing out misinformation and alternative narratives through his media, which can then turn the public against this piece of legislation or policy, which might have been better for them, and then kill it. And that's how he can use his enormous wealth to have political influence. Another example is Gina Rinehart, Australia's richest person. She's commonly seen fine dining with some of Australia's biggest politicians and ex-politicians like Scott Morrison, Peter Dutton, Pauline Hanson. She has an agenda and she wants to remain being the richest person in Australia. These people aren't lobbying for outcomes which are going to best benefit the majority of people in our country. You know, working people like you and I, again, unless you're a multimillionaire or a billionaire watching this, they want to continue building their enormous empire of wealth and power and continue building that wealth to gain more power, to have more influence. So the point I'm trying to make in this video is that the more we fight amongst each other over our differences, as I said, it's healthy to have debates and disagree on issues, but the more we get caught up in these differences, the more that the billionaire elites and the big corporations are going to keep swooping in and capturing more wealth and more power to keep doing so. If we turn our gaze to top versus bottom instead of left versus right, we can then actually have a better chance at solving some of the biggest issues in our country, like the housing and cost of living crisis, and get good political outcomes which are going to benefit the majority of people in the country instead of the wealthy billionaire elites. Now, there's some ways we could do this. One way would be a wealth tax, the idea of taxing wealth, not work. taxing people who wouldn't even feel it. We need to level the playing field a little bit. We need to make the big corporations like the gas corporations pay some tax, pay their royalties, pay what they owe, just like we all pay our tax. And we need better transparency and accountability when it comes to things like donations and lobbying. Right now, the major political parties are taking massive donations from big corporations, and they're being lobbied by these big corporations to basically suit the agenda of these big corporations and billionaires. And we're seeing these outcomes in the legislation that's passed in Parliament. And this is detrimental to our democracy, and it needs to change. So there are some solutions, but it's going to require the will of the people to stand up and push for this change that we need. No one said it's going to be easy, but if we want to actually build a country and get outcomes which are going to benefit the majority of Australians rather than just the elites, then we need to stand up and we need to push for this change, and we need to believe that it's possible. If we just believe that everything is corrupt, that our politicians are captured and there's nothing we can do about it, then we've just lost our power. We've given all of our power to them and they've won and we've lost. So we need to believe that this change is possible and stand up so we can actually try and make it happen, because it is possible. If you agree with this, or even if you disagree, leave me a comment about your thoughts and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos. Cheers.